Confederate statue repaired at 6th and Woodbine Street. That's where I call it the Farm Show building, but it's really the Dauphin County Agricultural Fairgrounds Floral Hall. Okay, so Governor Kirkland takes it over 5 days after the surrender of Fort Sumter and creates the largest civil war training grounds in the United States. There's over 300,000 Pennsylvania men went through the Farm Show, as I call it, to make it simple. If you look at your map, you'll see where Camp Kirkland was up there in the northeast corner. Now it's across from the State Hospital. Back then it was called the State Lunatic Asylum. It was built in 1851. And McClay Street was called Asylum Road. 6th Street was Ridge Road or Ridge Street. And what had happened, once a regiment was formed at Camp Kirkland, they'd march down Ridge Road, and Governor Kirkland would wait for them behind the state capitol building and hand them their federal and state flags. They'd go to the train station, and then they'd go off to war. Now, the population of the United States back then was 31 million. There's 22 million in the north, and there's 22,000 miles of rail line. There is 9 million in the south, and there's 9,000 miles of rail line in the south. It's interesting how the population equaled the mileage on the railroad. Now, of course, that 9 million, 3.5 million were African Americans. So it's just crazy for them to think that they could take on the United States and win that war. That's just remarkable what they did take on, because all the industry was up north. It surely wasn't down south. Now, the population of Philadelphia was about 555,000. Pittsburgh was 55,000, just to give you an idea of the time. Now, on Washington's birthday, 1861, Lincoln's down in Philadelphia putting the 34-star flag over Independence Hall. And he was told by 2 separate individuals, one of them, Seward's son, future Secretary of State Seward, and a Pinkerton detective, that they're going to kill you when you leave Harrisburg, because his next stop from Philadelphia was Harrisburg. And I have brought along some of my Lincoln postcard collection. One of them is Lincoln in Harrisburg. And I have some Southern cartoons over there that they made fun of Lincoln sneaking out of Harrisburg, because they cut all the telegraph wires around the city, except for the railroad, because the new Confederate acres were watching the Jones Hotel. That burnt down in 1921, and then later was rebuilt. You might know it's a Dolphin building, but that's not the original building that Abraham Lincoln was in. So they dressed Lincoln up in a cap and a cape, and one of the Pinkertons like Lincoln. And they went separate ways out separate doors, and they dropped Governor Kirkland off at the governor's mansion. Back then, 2nd Street was 2 ways, and they dropped Kirkland off at 2nd and Chestnut Street. What's the building at 2nd and Chestnut? Executive House Apartments, because that's where the executive mansion was. Now, that was Pennsylvania's first governor's mansion. It was built in 1859. And by the end of Kirkland's first 3-year term, there were 3 years back then, he was going to quit. He was burned out. And they go, we'll get you a nicer building on Front Street. So 1864 to 67, he's out on Front Street. And then General Geary takes over as governor and doubles the size of the home. They put a phony front so both places would match. And I have a whole postcard of the governor's mansion that was on the 300 block of Front Street till 1960. I also have an article back there. There were six governors were from Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. It was the town of governors. Who were they? Kirkland, Beaver, Hastings, the Bigler brothers, 1851. The one's out in California, the other one is in Pennsylvania. Governor Hastings liked the state capitol so much, the front of his home up in Bellefonte is the Civil War state capitol, which I have photos of it. Okay? He got a male and female squirrel from Virginia and brought it to the Harrisburg, and of course they mated. And that's how we got all those squirrels all over Capitol Park. You know, when I was a kid, you'd go feed the squirrels. And they started having postcards of this one squirrel, Billy the Squirrel. I have a whole series of Billy the Squirrel postcards. And Hastings used to count how much peanuts he fed every day to these squirrels. So, just a neat little story. I have a lot of that stuff. I just love all the sidebars of the history of Harrisburg. Now, up here, I have cigar box labels, Governor Kirkland, General Hartranft, the guy on the horse in front of the state capitol. Camp Curtin Historical Society has done several state markers, and we had a plaque placed on the Hartranft statue because nobody knew who the man was anymore. He hung the Lincoln conspirators. He reorganized the state's National Guard. He hung the Mullen McGuires when he was governor. Did a lot of things. And so we got permission to get a plaque placed on there. I also was involved with the Harrisburg Roundtable. I placed 2 state markers for them. One was the Battle of Sporting Hill, there at Sporting Hill Road and Carlisle Pike, and also the General Geary state marker. I was involved in that. So I've been doing this for probably 30-some years, putting waysides and markers around the area. We've recently spent $100,000 and we put up monuments and waysides pertaining to the Confederate invasion of Harrisburg. And they're all back there. I have them laminated so you can look at them afterwards. Yeah, Jeff's holding one up. So up here I try to do a Gettysburg theme. Now we'll look at this after I give a talk on the invasion. But it's really cool. You know the book Frazanito did, Journey in Time? And you have the Confederates lined up perfect at Rose Woods for burial. Here they are before they lined them up. And when you look at that, be sure you look at the young boy laying on top of all the bodies. I sell these newspapers at my store, I get them in. They're really cool ones I keep for myself. The Major Wells statue, you know, at the base of the little round top. 1913, the dedication, check that out. You know where Stevens Knoll is at Gettysburg? Off East Cemetery Hill? John Chase of the 5th Maine Artillery was hit with 48 pieces of shrapnel. And they threw him in a wagon. He was dead, they thought. He hit a bump and he comes out of his comb and he crawls out of the bodies and goes, "Did we win?" They said, "You're still going to die." They put him in a dead room. "Here's some water, food, see you later." He never dies. He ends up being a guide at the Gettysburg battlefield. But before he did that, I just got this one. Now, this company also will colorize it. They're really cool. There he is. He was a tour guide for the Gettysburg Cyclorama when it used to be up in Boston before they moved it to Gettysburg in 1913. There he is. His arm's missing. His eyes missing. He held a lot of patents. He invented a lot, like a hoop skirt for women, did all kinds of things after the Civil War stuff. It's really neat. I think it's about 1888. So check that out. And the ones here, General Meade, out where the golf course is, day one, they used to have the Springs Hotel that everybody went and stayed at. Then they went into Gettysburg, but burned down in 1917. That's Meade getting a drink out of the spring, and the Springs Hotel's in the background. This is when he came in to dedicate the Soldiers' National Monument in 1869 at Gettysburg. So, I'll get into the rest of this stuff later after I give my talk. So twice, Lee tried to take Harrisburg. And the first time causes Antietam. Now, if you have the book Training of an Army, it went out of print and I had to bring it back out. And it's now called Civil War City, Harrisburg. If you turn to page 110, it'll talk about General Walker being with Lee and saying, "What's your objective here?" And he says, "We're going to go to Hagerstown, we're going to mess up the railroads, and we're heading right here." He says, General Lee puts his finger right on Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So a lot of times, you know, he goes, "Oh, he never wanted Harrisburg." If you have that book, page 110, it's right there. Then the second attempt, of course, causes Gettysburg. Now, if you have Jubilee Early's Narratives of the Civil War, there's a whole chapter starting on page 253 on how they were to go to Harrisburg. And he said, "We were supposed to go over and loot Columbia, and I felt if we could pull it off, we were going to Lancaster. Then we were to come back and burn the bridge on the west shore, but the Yankees already beat us to it. But I was going to burn it on the east shore and go from Columbia up through Middletown to Harrisburg and beat Ewell." He said, "We were then really, if I'd have obeyed orders, we were supposed to go up to Dillstown, called Dillsburg, Dillstown, and then go Old York Road to Carlisle to help you with the invasion. What did Jeb Stuart do? When he's done with Custer and Hanover, he goes to Dillsburg. And he leaves 1/3 of his men there with Wade Hampton, and he goes down Old York Road, and in Hippie Town he leaves. If you look at the back here on your map, you'll see Dillsburg, Hampton, then Churchtown, he leaves Chambliss there. Then he comes into Carlisle with just Fitz-Lee. And Fitz-Lee's men are all through Seven Gables condominiums. My daughter's a general manager there. And so that's where Fitz-Lee is, right there near the giant grocery store. So they're, if you look at the bottom of the map, you see where the roads meet, York Road and Trimble Road? Right there, it's a Speedway gas. It was a Hess. They had cannons there. That's where they hung people in Carlisle. That's where the gallows were. And then they also had cannons up across from Burger King, up there near Lowe's. When they come into Lowe's, they set up their cannons. They run across the street, and there's a great brick building still there. And that's what's left of the Civil War Gas Company. There's 35,000 feet of gas underground, and Superintendent Wise shut it off for it. Everything would have been blown up. But they set the gas company on fire, and then they ran over to Wise Market and lit the lumberyard on fire. Then they go out to the Army War College, Army Barracks, and they torched that. Now, to repair it, they estimated what needed done right away was $25,000, which is $350,000 in today's money. But really, it would have been over $500,000 to fix everything that Jeb Stuart burned up. So what happens is Jeb finds out he's supposed to be in Gettysburg, so he backtracks on York Road. And look back up here, and you'll see right there Fitz-Lee's brigade. That's Forge Road. He goes to Boiling Springs. Then he turns and goes down to Route 34 on his way to Gettysburg. That's how he gets around the Union Army when he finally does return to Gettysburg. Now, getting back to the map, Stonewall Jackson gets killed by his own men, and I have a map. Shoot, I left it out the car. It wasn't on top. It's a map that he had done from January to March of 1863 by Jed Hotchkiss. It goes right to Harrisburg. Now, what did Hotchkiss do before the Civil War? Where was he born? Binghamton, New York. He was a Yankee. And then he teaches school right above Harrisburg in the coal regions. And he was the one pushing Lee and Stonewall to come up for Harrisburg. That's not me talking, that's Dr. Christian Keller, who trains our generals at the Army War College. Stonewall was pushing this. So, our ships were being run by Schuylkill County Coal. So they're going to take Harrisburg and go mess up the coal mines. Where Stonewall died, that changes all that. You know, you just think if he wouldn't have been killed, what would have happened? It would have been so interesting. I'm glad that didn't happen. Harrisburg probably would have been taken because if General Ewell is leaving on the 29th of June, Monday, marching to Harrisburg, with roads coming in on Trimble Road, and Allegheny Johnson was going to come in on Carlisle Pike, but they were stopped at 1 o'clock. But Ewell goes, puts his tents back up, disobeys orders, sends word to Gordon Early in Wrightsville and York to meet him the next day in Harrisburg. If he'd immediately left, Stonewall would have immediately left. They'd have had the high ground in Gettysburg. I think Stonewall, would have been there in Harrisburg a day early, and who knows what would have happened. So this is one of the fun what ifs. So getting back to the invasion, General Jenkins comes into Carlisle on Saturday, takes the town, and the women are scared, so they're coming out with jars of apple butter and homemade bread, and they're dipping it, serving all the Confederates, and they're just wolfing this down. They never had apple butter before. It's a Pennsylvania Dutch thing. So after that happens, and he takes control of town, here comes General Ewell. Now I have back there a photo of the two homes on that table where Ewell ate and where Rhodes ate outside of Carlisle before they came in and took the town. Now, it's on Walter Bottom Road in Centerville. So when Ewell comes in, he tells Jenkins to proceed to Mechanicsburg in towards Harrisburg and start checking out the defenses. So if you look at this map here again, on the back, you see Latour Creek. So Jenkins waters his horses there at Latour Creek, 1,250 of them. Then you start heading east on Trindle Road. You go by the word Stewart above Trindle Road. And you go underneath Route 81. When you come out, there's a sheets there that would take you back to Army Heritage Center. That's where Jenkins now feeds his horses. And the way I know, I found a citizen's report saying that Jenkins leaves 2 miles out from the square. That's 2 miles out from the square, that sheets area. And Saturday night, if you look at the map, he stays in Hickorytown. And it's at Byard-Boyer Road is where they camp along that road. It's the only body of water there. So we know for sure it's Hickorytown. But I would think it would have to be that farm at Byard-Boyer Road. The Byers became Boyers because it's the only body of water there. You got 1,250 horses. So then he gets up Sunday morning, and if you flip your map over, you see Mechanicsburg at the bottom. If you look to the left, it says Carlisle. Right in that area, there's Terranetti's Bakery, and there's Trindle Springs Creek there. That's where he waters his horses, and that's documented. Then he sends 2 men with a white truce flag in through Mechanicsburg, and he saw the mayor take the American flag down at the square, and they followed him down to his home at 312 East Main Street. Now, they didn't know his wife's behind the door with a loaded shotgun. Luckily, they didn't go inside because we have no idea what she would have done. So they're walking back to the square, and they demand food. And 4 Parrott guns that they got from Milroy at 2nd Winchester, they put 2 of them down west of the town where Maine and Simpson meet. And he said, if you don't get us supplies, 1,500 rations, we're going to shell the town. They had a boy run up and down the streets in Mechanicsburg with a church bell. Food for the Confederates, food for the Confederates. And everybody loads up their Sunday dinners, and they go out and eat them right almost to the Nyack farm. You know where the giant grocery store is there at Simpson Street. They're in that area, eat everybody's Sunday dinners. So then they get those 4 Parrott guns, they put them down at letter B. So they have 2 Parrott guns that can go 2 miles in front of the Peace Church, and the other 2 are out in the street. So you have 850 Confederates across from letter A, the Rough House. And I just found out about 3 months ago, they are definitely across the street. I always thought they'd be right below the house. Here that was all cherry orchards. And he said within 2 days, the Confederates have all the trees stripped. They're just tearing branches off and popping cherries in their mouth. And the funny thing is, the Union troops were doing that all through Lemoyne Camp Hill. The same thing. There's a big cherry tree area for some reason. It's a big deal back then. It sure isn't now, but they were eating all the cherry trees, the spitting pits at each other, having cherry seed battles. So you have the 800 across the Rough House, you have the 4 cannons at the Base Church. Now, those units consist of the 14th and 16th Virginia and the 36th Virginia Battalion. They send the 34th Battalion out Oakstown Road, which now is York Road, then becomes Oakstown, out to Walmart. And they make a right, and they hide down there, Babies R Us and Toys R Us, the Turnpike House. Carlisle Pike was America's first turnpike. You turn the pike, you let the people through. So about every 2 miles, you have these big double chimney homes where you eat, sleep, and pay your toll. So they hid down there, 450 men on horse at the creek, and they put their 2 cannons, a 3-inch ordnance and a 12-pound field howitzer, up at Salem Church, right there near Duck Donuts. And they fire over Applebee's, and they hit the Union Militia Carpet Park there, letter J. These guys never fought in their life, so they ran back to Dockside Willie's there at the Lemoyne Bottleneck. So you had 12,000 Union troops, mostly New York National Guard, some were Pennsylvania Emergency Militia. Now, what was confusing, when Jeb Stuart was in Carlisle, he got to that point on the map where I told you they had cannons there, and he thought there was Confederate troops in front of him. Union Militia from New York had great uniforms. So he thought they were Confederates, and he started getting shot at. A lot of people died, just found that out too, so that's a pretty cool sidebar. So they fired the Union troops, they run back. You have 12,000 Union militia from the river to L.B. Smith Ford, letter H. Now back then, Bridgeport and later Lemoyne only had 12 homes. The Union troops drained the wells, so nobody had water to drink. So the Harrisburg Fire Department ran hoses up the Lemoyne bottleneck and filled up barrels so everyone would have drinking water. And back then, Wormleysburg, West Fairview, Lemoyne, and Harrisburg was dumping raw sewage in the river. Not until 1913, when they built the Dock Street Dam, did they stop dumping sewage in the river. So when that dam was built, it was called the Healthy Dam, because what happened in the summer, you could walk across the river. I have photos back there of right after the Civil War, there's no water in the river hardly. You could walk across it. Washington drove his carriage across it during the Whiskey War. And you could go right across there very easily. And so they wanted the water table to get up because all the human waste was piling up on the rocks in the summertime when there's droughts. These guys are drinking that water. That's what they had. Now, an interesting sidebar, another one I just found out, they do have a newspaper on the farmers coming from Carlisle Pike to Harrisburg. Everybody was fleeing the Confederates. Lee got over 70,000 pigs, sheep, and cattle out of the Cumberland Valley. That doesn't count the chickens they ate on the fly and all the horses and stuff. They were backed up over the Market Street Bridge, the Lemoyne bottleneck, down almost to Route 15 in Camp Hill. So now you have millions of flies because the water's low. It's summertime in the river because of human waste. And now you have all the farm animals' feces all up and down the road. They said it wasn't millions, there were billions of flies all through that area. Now, of course, Camp Hill, only 12 homes, is called Whitehall. The Church of God started in this area in the 1820s. The one on 21st Street there was built in 1847. And there was a church camp up on a hill. So that's how Camp Hill gets its name, because of a Church of God camp up on a hill. It has nothing to do with an Arlington, just so you know. So the Confederates camp on Carlisle Pike from Red Lobster, that'd be Lehman, and they go down Orsbridge Road, and I have a postcard I just bought, I found, and it is Mr. Orr's barn, which is now the entrance to Pine Brook. And Jenkins and his men went in there and looted the barns filled with tobacco. He was a tobacco farmer. And then when all the fighting was done around here, General Knight, who named Camp Kirkland, gave its name, he had some militia guys in that area guarding Harrisburg just in case the Confederates would come back. And he said all along the creek there at Orr's Bridge, there was like 50 campfires going with Union troops. I never knew that. I just found that out last week. So if you know where Orsbridge Road is, okay, yeah, just go down there and just imagine Union troops all along there, 50 campfires going. So they put their cannons now at the Albright House, which is still standing. What's interesting is everything is still standing. It's not like, well, this used to be here, this used to be here. All the buildings are there. So they have 4 cannons at B, 2 at C. So they're keeping Union troops pinned down. And they said after the invasion, people were finding piles of 20 to 30 cannonballs in the area. A lot of it solid shot. They didn't explode. And they said they got tired of giving them away to all their relatives over the years. You know, they said someone gave people in New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, and we got tired of it, and they buried it in their backyards. So a lot of people don't realize they got Civil War cannonballs in their yards in Camp Hill from the invasion. So there is part of Fort Couch there, and the monument we put there cost $50,000. And what's really cool with that monument, it looks like black granite, but really it's called diabase stone. The vein of this stone runs from Little Round Top, Devil's Den, Chester County for the Carolinas. Those boulders, just hold it up. The boulders at Devil's Den are diabase. That monument is in the vein that runs through Little Round Top and Devil's Den. It was mine in Chester County. So that's pretty neat. So So they're keeping Union troops pinned down. If you look at letter B, Jenkins on Monday morning goes up St. John's Road, makes a left, and I have a picture of the farm that's still there. And with his field glasses, he could see the Union troops walking on top of the Loin Bottleneck. And he had an idea how many were there. So he sent word back to General Ewell to come in and attack Harrisburg on Monday morning. Now some of the staff continued in. They go by, if you look at the bottom of your map, you see farm and Slade Hill. They go by there, they go to the Hertzler farm, and they go up to the Gorgas farm. Now, I have a picture of that home. It's still there at Bowling Green Cemetery. 14-year-old William Gorgas and his dad are on the roof for 2 days watching the Confederate Union cannonballs go back and forth on Carlisle Pike and Trimble Road. Who was head of Confederate ordnance? Josiah Gorgas. Where was Josiah Gorgas from? Here. You have the guy from here, Elizabethtown, running Pump Farm, is head of Confederate ordnance. So how did that happen? His wife was the governor's daughter of Alabama. We're going home to Daddy. He was head of the Philadelphia Armory. He goes down to Alabama. He invents the Gorgas gun. Look that up. And so he's in charge of Brown's Island in March of 1863. What happens in Brown's Island in Richmond? They have a bad fire. A lot of young girls killed. That happened other places. It happened in Antietam up in Pittsburgh. The arsenal there. It also happened at the arsenal in Washington. So we don't have the right equipment to make the fuses properly anymore. And what's the next big battle? Gettysburg. What happens at Pickett's charge? They're overshooting Union troops because they have crappy fuses. Because of Brown's Island. Okay? So, they go back, they tell Ewell to come in, remember how I said, so he's getting ready on Monday morning to come in to attack Harrisburg, and that's when he gets the word to turn around and leave. And guess what he forgets to do? He forgets to tell General Jenkins to get out. Jenkins is out behind Wegmans and Target with Colonel Ferguson, Luton Farms. If you look at your map, right there at Turnpike House, to the left of it, you can see a Convent Creek. They're out there, Luton Farms, waiting for Ewell, who's not coming. 300 are in Denny's, Limes Woods, and 50 are in the Everly Barn. 1,400 Union come out, and they line up from Gilligan's Dunkin' Donuts. That's where I put the state marker back in 1997 for the Battle of Sporting Hill. It's now Gilligan's, it was the Ale House. So the Confederates run down the Lowe's and come through Outback Steakhouse and try to flank them, and they fire artillery, push the Confederates across the road, and they kill 16, wounded 30 Confederates. The dead Confederates are buried along Route 581 in the hotel parking lot. What was left of those bodies in 1895 was dug up and shipped to Hagerstown. And unmarked graves in the Rose Hill Cemetery. So, there's 5 high water marks, which I call it the Harrisburg Campaign that causes Gettysburg. Of course, you say that, you get shot. Well, I don't say that. It's Gettysburg, oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, you have 70,000 guys, 50,000 horses, 1,500 dead horses after that, 22,000 guys laying around in Gettysburg. It was so big, I don't know why everyone ignored what happened around here. The stuff happened here. I'm giving a tour May 4th, 9:30 to 3 o'clock on the invasion of Harrisburg from General Meade Society. And you're allowed to go on that. If you look at General Meade Society on their website, you can call and go on that tour. $70 and includes lunch. Then from 3 o'clock to 4, I'm doing a tour of the Harrisburg Civil War Battle Flag Lab, all the state flags. And then from 4 to 5, I'm giving a tour of the Harrisburg Cemetery. So it's going to go 9:30 to 5. Okay? So, is there any questions? Now, when I'm done here, like I said, I have the table spread out. I'll be walking around. I'll be glad to answer questions. You know, Again, thank you so much. Go ahead.
Spurred us that a Confederate
Oh, thank you.
soldier
Thank you.
fought.
Yeah, I have so many things that, you know, I let stuff out like that. That's when people go to my talks and I say something different every time. And here's something I just thought came to me. One of the New York militia guarding the Marysville Bridge, Boston Corvette who killed John Wilkes Booth. And he went up to Duncannon trying to find Alexander Stevenson's relatives, the Vice President of the Confederacy's relatives in Perry County. Okay, there's 5 high water marks at the Gettysburg Campaign. Now I have the 1929 newspaper, Pittsburgh Sun, back there, dedicating the monument halfway upstairs Gap. Company A, 1st Maryland Cav. Now just think on Sunday the 28th, what happens? All kinds of stuff happens on Sunday the 28th. America's largest covered bridge is on fire at Wrightsville. General Meade takes command. General Jenkins captures Mechanicsburg. And also, 60 guys. Just pretend at the top of the map, that's the mountain range, which that's where it would be. So they leave Carlisle, and halfway up the mountain, they find out that 2 companies in New York National Guard with Perry County boys and former officers that have served their time have fortifications built upstairs Gap. So they return to Carlisle. On that boulder it says, "This is the farthest point North American Civil War that the Army in Northern Virginia reached. Hearing that the hills are fortified, they returned to their outpost in Carlisle. Thus ended the high tide of the Confederacy." Now, before 1933, our state markers were boulders with bronze plaques. After 1933, when they merged the historical museum commissions, that's when you get the blue and gold signs that you're familiar with today. So a lot of these boulders are taken from Little Round Top. The War Department allowed that to happen. So some of these boulders are Gettysburg stones. Just like where Meade met Hooker. Meade was not sworn in on that spot. He was notified south of Frederick. He told Hooker where that boulder is outside of Frederick. It says this is taken from Devil's Den on that boulder. That's where he meets Hooker. It's not where Meade's sworn in. Okay? So, a high water mark without a fight, no death, is halfway upstairs Gap. The furthest east there's action, Wrightsville. Okay? The closest to Harrisburg. Look at letter E, Limekill Lane. It's an alley they call 28th Street. What you do, as you can see, Truman Road used to go in and touch Market there at the Oyster Point Hotel. It now stops and bears right and becomes Chestnut Street. So go to 28th and Chestnut, make a left, and there's the barn the Confederates lined up and shot at Union troops around 2602, the postmaster's house. He's up in the attic and you can hear the bullets pinging off the side of the house. Okay, the one Confederate is shot and captured there and he cut his leg off behind it. Boom. Postmaster Bowman's brother was a doctor. Okay, so that's the closest to Harrisburg. The farthest point north of the Army in Northern Virginia, organized action, is the Battle of Sporting Hill, letter J, all out in that area, barely farther north than Oyster's Point, but it is. And then the 5th high water mark, the main battle, the main army, Gettysburg. Now, when they call that spot the high water mark, that meant that's the beginning of the end of the Confederacy and the government. It didn't mean it's the farthest north, but everybody just took it as that. Okay? Now, if you want to count the terrorist guerrilla action, a couple of guys going up to Vermont, but really organized, as I call it, the Harrisburg Campaign because of Gettysburg. It's what I just said. Okay?
Carlisle Springs, is that about where they got on steroids?
That's where that's halfway up. You just think of this area. What do you got? York Springs, Carlisle Springs, Orland Springs, and Springs Hotel, Gettysburg. This is a big area. George Washington came to York Springs before he died. He's healing waters, okay? So you have a lot of these springs. Where did Grant die? Saratoga Springs, right? Same thing. I was up at Grant's cottage years ago, and there's no one up there. This is the middle of a prison camp. And what happened, Metropolitan Life built a get well for trying to think of the disease. Can't think what it is, right? Polio or whatever. Of course, that gets stopped, so they turn into a prison. You can still go up to Grant's Cottage. So they go up there and they got the cocaine floating in the water that they coated his throat with. The pan's right there, thank you, Dr. So-and-so, for letting me use your house. When he was about dead, he couldn't lay down anymore, so he sat in 2 leather chairs propped up. You go out in the living room, the clock's there, then his son stopped, and you did that in Victorian times when he died. Then the desk bed's in the corner. The famous chair, you see him all covered up, that's in the corner with a wreath the grandchildren made. You go to the dining room, all the flowers are still there from 1885. They're white, gray, and tan. Now this gets really good. As you can see, General Meade was here. I said, no, he wasn't. Who are you? You know, that's about how they acted. I said, we're going to do a little math. I said, when did Meade die? And their face just go, oh, no. 1872, how could he be here? Read the pillow. General Meade, GAR, post number 1, Philadelphia. And they've been telling all these, for decades, and telling everyone General Meade's there for the Grant guys. So he said, you just changed the tour. So, interesting. Yeah.
Question of
Yeah.
Tim, I'm interested in your insight on why did it take the Pennsylvania Emergency Militia so long to react to the June 12th call for emergency to respond to this?
Because they didn't like the deal, they didn't trust Kirkland. So then they had to get New Yorkers to come down. And they weren't happy because they saw these young Pennsylvania boys walk around doing nothing. The trouble is when the Confederates came up and they saw these young Pennsylvania boys doing nothing, and they saw these farms that are loaded with everything, twice the size of theirs, and all this industry, they knew before Gettysburg the war was over. Some of the diaries said, we're done. And they saw that. When the New Yorkers were in Camp Hill, they saw Amish for the first time. They thought they were Confederates, and they had to stop them from killing them. They were going to shoot. They were going to shoot the Amish. So now, one other thing I want to bring up back there, you know, they tried to steal Lincoln's body in the 1880s. A bunch of counterfeiters. They were going to get their buddy out of jail. So there was a secret society formed. They got caught, and they took Mary Todd and Lincoln out and put them underneath the mausoleum, or whatever you want to call it, and threw a bunch of boards on it. So for years, people would go in and put their hands and cry and praise. They weren't even there. Then the tomb is falling apart. So they rebuilt it. And Lincoln was guarded better dead than he was alive. They had a 24-hour guard. Him and Mary Todd were out in the field with guards around them until they rebuilt the tomb. So they interviewed a gentleman in the 70s called Fleetwood Lindley. And he was 13 years old, and his dad sent a pass to get him out of school to come to the cemetery immediately. And he goes in there, and they cut Lincoln's body open, the casket. Now, they take it off. His eyebrows are gone. His hair is perfect. His beard is perfect. There's yellow mold starting to grow on him. There's red dust on his chest from the decomposed flag. His head is slightly off the pillow. If you saw the movie Lincoln, you saw the white kid gloves that Mary Todd always made him wear. He took them off when she walked out. He had those gloves on his hands. But it was Abraham Lincoln. His skin was like brown leather saddle. Back then, he used arsenic, which is illegal today. You don't decompose. But it was Abraham Lincoln. So they put him back just the way they found him before they rebuilt. And his son threw a fit and made him pour tons of cement over both the bodies so it could never be stolen again. But Abraham Lincoln was looked at. A lot of people don't know. It's a neat story. So I have that back there with the cranes and everything lifting the tomb apart. Oh, that's pretty cool. Any other questions? I do have the book that I co-authored with Larry King Farley. It's a fundraiser for Camp Kirk Historical Society. We spent over $100,000 now putting up monuments and waysides. We have more to do. We need thousands of dollars. And we're the first organization to adopt a monument at Gettysburg to pay for a repair. The trouble is they didn't repair it. They kept the money and did other things. They just refused to repair that. So once a certain individual left, who I knew was causing the problems, then I started speaking up again. They finally repaired it this summer. There were 6 pieces busted off the 17th Pennsylvania. The curry comb, the bridle, the kepi, the hammer on the gun, the spur, and we're looking at hopefully rededicating it May 18th. So Ricky's our vice president, so if you're not doing anything, hopefully I can have word out on that, but I have a bunch of government forms I gotta do. It's gonna be a Zoom, but we're looking at hopefully May 18th to rededicate. Carol Reardon said she'd be the keynote speaker for the rededication. So, thanks again. Oh, go ahead. One more question.
Political question.
What?
Political question.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen to Camp Kirkland United Methodist Church?
Well, I've been going to meetings on that. And some of the Methodist churches only have 25 people, 30. They gotta go. But that church was fine. State Street was fine. But this is an experiment. We had a company come up from Philly to help save the historic churches. And they said, let's just shut them all down. We don't care what they do. We're just gonna shut them all down and go meet in a vacant shop center somewhere next to church. Camp Kirkland feeds 100 people every other day. They have a kindergarten for poor kids. It's paid for by grandma. There's no reason church is fine, it's in the black. There's no reason for this. That church is built honoring men that ended slavery. And no one's coming out with a neat article on this because no one's asleep. What happens is, during Gettysburg, James Beaver's recovering from a wound he received at Chancellorsville. He got hit. Luckily, a pencil saved his life. And he's in there recovering, and Camp Kirkland's in charge of it. Now, in August of '64 at Ballerine Station, he loses his leg. He goes back to Bellefonte, gets political, and he's governor during the Johnstown flood. Then he's on the board of Penn State and then becomes president by appointment, not by election, 1906 to 1908. And when that's done, he comes to Harrisburg with all kind of national politicians, Secretary of Wars, all kind of power people. And they raise $1 million to build that church, honoring the American Civil War soldier and honoring men that ended slavery and won the war. And it's getting shut down. They're just shutting down, and they don't care. They said that, we don't care.
I ask because
It's sad.
our church does the breakfast down at the state.
Yeah, and you know why they don't care about that? You know what they said? It doesn't count that you're doing it because you need other people from other churches, so it doesn't count. Give me a break. This is sad. People gotta do something.
And that was the legislature met there when the Capitol burned down.
I have back there the state capitol, and it burned down. The temporary one is still there, I have a picture of it. It's the Cobb Capitol. And they built a new one on top of it. But when that burned down, Groundhog's Day, 1897, from 1897 to 1906, that was our state capitol in the church. They can't do anything in your church because it's in the historic district, it's on the historic register. It cannot be knocked down, it cannot be altered. The Camp Kirkland Church, we had put on the National Register, but it's not in the historic district. So as long as it's standing, it can't be altered, but they can tear it down. But what they didn't realize is the church has been getting grants from the state to fix things. There's a lien against the church. And it must be left open for 10 more years, 100 days a year. So we got them on that. So this is interesting what's going on. Like, I got enough on my hands. I'm trying to deal with that. So I don't know where I find the time. But
Thank you.
again, thanks everybody.